founder of the Jewelry Library, and we are in the Great Room. By day, this is a design office with architects, interior and graphic and industrial designers and filmmakers, and we design libraries. We do public libraries, we do college libraries, and the smallest library we've done is the Jewelry Library, which is on the 8th floor. The Jewelry Library is a place for stories, for finding them, for telling them, for creating them, and now that we've opened our shop next door, for bringing them home, bringing the pieces home. And in the world of stories, there are mysteries. I was a Nancy Drew fanatic, obsessed, read every single one, the clue in the jewel box, the clue of the broken locket, the mystery of the ivory charm. So I always knew that jewelry and detective work went hand in hand, which brings us to tonight. Well, I just want to say another thing. I also discovered that jewelry was often a clue to a larger story. Who made it, when, or why, who wore it, and how. And that brings us to tonight, to our story, Dorothy Liebes, the mystery of the matching cuffs. Now, early in the pandemic, in our lockdown, I got an email from a Charlotte von Hardenburgh with this picture attached. And it's just that. And it said, do you know who made these cuffs? And I'm just going to leave it at that. This is an evening where we'll discover who did. So let me introduce our speaker tonight. Tonight's intrepid jewelry detective, Charlotte von Hardenburgh, is a design historian and educator. She has been with Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum for the past 3 years, working as a curatorial and research fellow for the current exhibition and first ever monographic publication. That's your kid. Sorry. And about the textile designer and weaver Dorothy Liebes. Charlotte is a graduate of Parsons School of Design, where she currently teaches courses focusing on the history of design, fashion, and typography. I didn't know that. And I love typography. Okay, I love that. Her work and lectures highlight the influential yet underrepresented role of women within design, and her research centers those narratives to establish a more expansive and inclusive reinterpretation of American design history. So over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Karen for hosting in this incredible space. I'm always so happy when I get to be here as a guest. This is my first time doing a talk like this. So thank you all so much for being here, supporting friends, family, mom. So I also would love to thank my amazing team at Cooper Hewitt. Unfortunately, neither of them were able to come tonight, but Susan Brown and Alexa Griffith-Winton, I would not have been able to do any of this without their support. And of course, I have to thank Karen for her amazing support of my research and being able to host me here in this incredible space. And lastly, I am the American Women's History Initiative Research Fellow, and so I have to thank the American Women's History Initiative for funding my position and for really allowing me to be able to tell these stories of all of these women whose work has gone unrecognized until tonight. So just to give a little background, obviously we're all here either because you maybe know Dorothy Liebes, maybe you want to know a little bit more, maybe you just saw mystery and you just wanted to get, deep into some sort of detective work, or maybe you're a textile enthusiast. I don't really know, or maybe you're my little sister and I forced you to come here. But thank you so much. So if you don't know who Dorothy Liebes is, or if you are unfamiliar with what the Liebes Look is, I also wanted to give a little background into that, because that's how all of this research really started. My journey started with Dorothy Liebes in researching her textiles, but she's rather distracting to research because you see a woman like this Every single photo of her is phenomenal. Researching her and putting together an exhibition was a dream because there's not a bad photo of her out there. And so, obviously, when you see someone like this, you can't help but think, well, oh my gosh, this chic woman, who is she wearing? Where did she get this? And so, with Dorothy Liebes, there kept coming up all of these photos of her cuts in the same pair that she was wearing. And that's what led to me Googling around during the pandemic, trying to find something related to jewelry and history and some sort of documentation of all of that. And so that's why I'm here today. And so to give a little introduction as to who Dorothy Liebes is and get to see her amazing textiles, I feel like the Wizard of Oz because it's truly now all in Technicolor. If this is the only photo you know of Dorothy Liebes, oh my gosh, once you see her and once you see her textiles, right, it is like when Dorothy steps out of her little cottage. Her textiles were very well known for having an insane use of color. And this is during the 30s and the 40s, really established what mid-century modernism's color palette would come to be. So again, we have Dorothy Liebes here. And as you can tell, she again is wearing her gorgeous matching metallic cuts. And then on the right, again, if you don't really know who Dorothy Liebes is, you're unfamiliar with her, I would love to establish for you her importance. And so, for example, this right here on the right is the cover of House and Garden magazine, and it's from 1949. Designed by Herbert Matter, so if there's any graphic design nerds out there, Herbert Matter did this cover design, and he chose Dorothy Liebes's textiles to be featured on the cover. You can see, if you're not familiar, those are actually strands and spools of lurex on the left, which you're going to hear a lot about lurex if you like Liebes, because it's all over the book, it's all in the exhibition. Lurex, if you don't know, is a synthetic metallic yarn. So prior to this, prior to World War II, if you wanted to have some sort of metallic yarn, you would have to use some sort of fine metal. Whereas in the post-war period, they were able to make this synthetic yarn. You could dye it whatever color you wanted. So you could have ruby metallic, you could have neon metallic, you could have purple metallic. And so this actually is from Dorothy Liebes' studio, which she's photographed here, standing in front of many of her textiles, which we actually have on display right now at Cooper Hewitt. And then on the right-hand side, those sort of spools, that's how her studio was set up, just like this. And so that was the inspiration for this cover of House and Garden magazine. And on the right is actually one of her textiles. She was very well known for her upholstery, her draperies, her pillows, also fashion as well. But one main point of her practice were these reed blinds, bamboo blinds that she used all over the place. So just to kind of place her importance, you know, she was on the cover of House and Garden magazine. Also, within that same issue, this is the interior spread here. She was seated right next to Isamu Noguchi, which so many people have probably recognized that name or know his Noguchi coffee table, are familiar with the Akari light sculptures and everything. However, at the time, Dorothy Liebes was the famous one. Noguchi was the one who was just kind of getting his name established and everything. So it's just really remarkable that there's this woman who during her lifetime was so well known, yet now, I mean, she's not really talked about anymore until tonight, right? So I also just, again, to give a little glimpse into her textiles, and if this intrigues you, please, I'm going to do a plug for the exhibition after this, but we have all of these textiles at the Cooper Hewitt right now on display. It's an incredible journey into mid-century design, and everything, you go in there and it looks incredibly modern and contemporary. You see these patterns, you see these color combinations, they're from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, but I mean, they could be selling today in terms of how relevant they are, in terms of color palette. Also, one thing that is very characteristic of Dorothy Liebes is her use of materials. So if we look, and I just selected these just to give a little taste. Again, we're gonna get into the mystery, we're gonna get into the metal cups, but just in case you want to know a little bit about Dorothy Liebes, her unorthodox use of materials is something that really sets her apart as a textile designer and as a weaver. There's a quote that says, "Don't stand too close to the loom, otherwise Liebes will weave you in." Because she truly used so many different things in her textiles. On the left here, you can see brocaded ribbon that she would use in her weft threads. On the right here, this is actually leather that she would weave together, and it's just stunning. You have to see it in person. It looks incredible. And one other way that I kind of want to introduce Dorothy Liebes to all of you is through her interiors and the people that she was working with. So if you're familiar with Henry Dreyfuss, if you've ever seen a thermometer, a Honeywell thermometer that has the circular feature, that was designed by Henry Dreyfuss. Not only was he an industrial designer, he was also an incredible interior designer. And he and Dorothy Liebes redid the Persian room at the Plaza Hotel. And this is the Persian room, which unfortunately is no longer with us. However, Dorothy Liebes was commissioned to do the textiles for it. This is one of my favorite stories about her textiles and how just innovative she was with materials and thinking about space and experience of space. So here is the actual sample, which is at Cooper Hewitt right now. And you can tell it has this gorgeous blue and green lurex. But if you look actually at the image, you'll notice these little sparkling lights. Perhaps I hope you can all see them. And that's because Dorothy Liebes and her team actually wove in tiny surgical lights into the textile itself. And it was supposed to illuminate and kind of replicate the idea of champagne bubbles floating to the top. So it's just, I mean, the whimsy. She was very much in love with what she was doing, as I am. And so I just love to kind of place this for you all too, so that you know she was doing these commissions at these really, notable clients in these amazing interiors, especially in a place like the Plaza Hotel, where the Persian room, Billie Holiday was performing there. It was really in its day the place to be. I also can't not mention my trip to Hawaii that I had to do, because for Dorothy Liebes, if you were to go anywhere in the world, the only place that you can see Dorothy Liebes textiles in their original place, you have to go to Honolulu. That's the only place that it exists. And so that's exactly what I did. I had to for research. So I went to Shangri-La, Doris Duke's Hawaii home, and the Dorothy Liebes textiles are still on display. You can see the upholstery as well as the portieres and all of the curtains that hang in the living room of Shangri-La. So it's just incredible. She was this prolific woman doing all these notable clients and commissions and everything. Yet the only place where you can experience Dorothy Liebes textiles now is at Shangri-La. No other interiors that we know of, at least, have been found to have original Liebes textiles in them. So it's just kind of remarkable to think about. Yes, and of course that is me in the middle there. I just had to point that out. I loved this trip. It was too much fun, I would say. I was. And you can only imagine, I was doing this research during the pandemic. I was looking at a screen. And so then when I actually got to I saw the textiles in Hawaii before I saw the textiles at Cooper Hewitt, just to give some perspective of when I saw these textiles in real life, So seeing the Dorothy Liebes textiles in real life was such a monumental moment for me. So again, she's working with a notable client, this amazing interior. And then lastly, just to give another little context as to who she was oftentimes working with a lot of clients who had notable art collections. So someone like Doris Duke, she traveled all around the Arab world of Western Asia on her honeymoon, collecting from Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, India. The last stop was Hawaii, and that's when she decided, I want to live here. And so that's why Shangri-La came to be. But she was amassing this amazing art collection of all of this Arabic art. That wasn't the first time for Dorothy Liebes, though. She actually oftentimes was given the client's art collection, and then from that was told to come up with textiles that would complement the colors, really do an amazing job at complementing the textures as well. So I love these examples here just because I'm very biased. I'm obsessed with everything I'm going to show you, but these are just some interiors that I find incredibly striking. Mainly also as an art historian buff too. So this is a Brock painting on the left here, which she did these nubby, again, very similar to Shangri-La in terms of the way that it's like a loop weave structure there. And then on the right, these are two photos from the same exact apartment. And this is it's not actually an apartment, I'm sorry. It's a gorgeous mansion that completely burnt down, which is, I know. No, and it's terrifying because I don't know if you realize this is Billy Rose's apartment. He's the man who bought the Ziegfeld Follies. He had these amazing Dali paintings that Dorothy Liebes was commissioned to create the blinds to complement the Dali paintings, which I mean, this Dali painting here, even just the shape of it is just incredible. And so you can imagine she was working with these high budgets, notable clients in these interiors that were just incredible. And one thing that's so amazing about her work and her as a person is she actually lasted for 40 years. She had a very long career. And part of that was because she was able to adjust. So she had all of these notable clients. She was doing a lot of, high budget commissions. However, I love mentioning too that after the war, she really focused on designing for the masses and getting everyone excited about being able to afford design in their own homes. So she was a consultant, a color consultant for many corporations in terms of teaching them, what sort of color palettes to put together for all of the products that they're going to be selling. And then I have to mention this one, which I'm sorry, that one's a little fuzzy, but one of her last commissions that she had was actually to do the upholstery for American Airlines. And again, this is another Henry Dreyfuss project where he was the interior designer and he commissioned Dorothy Liebes to do all of the upholstery on the inside of the plane. So you can imagine, it's Dorothy Liebes's textiles are in these very bougie apartments, but then by the end of her life, she was making textiles that anyone could sit on if you could afford a plane ticket, So there's this idea of her democratizing design, and I think that's why she was able to have this very long career and be able to remain relevant throughout all of her years. So again, just a little spiel about Dorothy Liebes, right? We're all excited, right, and love her. Okay, you can see the exhibition. Great. Because now we're going to go into the mystery. And you can only imagine, this is how I felt in the middle of the pandemic. Because I didn't think you all realized. I was given a photo, and it was like, who made these? By Alexa, if you're watching this. Alexa, my boss, was like, do you know who made these? Can you figure it out? Given just images, you can only imagine jewelry as an object. Obviously, you would want to know what its material is. You would want to flip it around and know, is there a hallmark on it? Is there any sort of, symbol? Which is why I tell all of my students who are designers, I say, make sure you make a little tag and put your name in it so that way, when some future historian is researching you, they will know that it was your work. So, for example, I had no idea in terms of the object itself, what it was made out of, who made it, or anything. Really, it was just these images. And so, what I started to do was I should point out that also within this image, you can see that Dorothy Liebes has a very impressive jewelry collection. We don't currently know where it is. I have some thoughts, but it would be amazing to actually see this jewelry in real life and put it on display because it is incredibly impressive. I don't know if there's any Mexican jewelry buffs out here, but she's actually wearing a Mathilde Poulat necklace, sterling silver with some turquoise accents in it. So, just even based off this image, we were able to decipher the fact that this woman was serious about her jewelry collection. However, we also had some other hypotheses in terms of wondering, are the cuffs designer? Are they some high-end brand? Or did she just find them while she was walking along a market in Turkey or, in Mexico? We had no idea because, again, we didn't have the objects themselves. So, and again, I also didn't even know if they were silver or if they were gold because here she is wearing the Mathilde Poulat necklace, which is silver. And it, honestly, black and white, it looks the same, right? But then through this sort of images, we were able to see, okay, so there's some sort of gold or brass, because sometimes you can immediately cross off artists if you know, oh, they only work with silver, or oh, they're mainly working in gold. So, thankfully, one fateful day, I was going through Dorothy Liebes's scrapbooks, which there are so many, and it's such a treasure trove. And she was so lovely to put that all together for us because it made the research so much fun to have these scrapbooks. And in the scrapbook, there is this amazing little interview that describes exactly what Dorothy Liebes is wearing. And this newspaper clipping is from 1939, when Dorothy Liebes was the head of the Decorative Arts Pavilion at the Golden Gate International Exposition. And so she's being interviewed. And in this, it says she is wearing a shocking pink lipstick, a little dress, and then she is wearing shocking pink lipstick. It's a hat. Okay, yeah. So she's wearing this shocking pink hat, and then at the very end it says, and one of Helen Hughes Delaney's 6-inch wide metal bracelets. The effect was breathtaking. And so I texted my boss immediately, and I said, oh my God, who is Helen Hughes Delaney? I've never heard of the name. I think I know design history. I think I know art history. I think I know jewelry history. I've never heard the name of Helen Hughes Delaney before. So immediately I started digging. I ended up finding out that Helen Hughes Delaney was actually one of Dorothy Liebes' very good friends. She had done her apartment for her in Chicago. Unfortunately, and this is one thing that it makes me terribly sad. We don't have so many images of these interiors, but Dorothy Liebes actually did the blinds in Helen Hughes Delaney's apartment, not only in Chicago, where she was based out of, but also in Hawaii, because Helen Hughes Delaney was married to the president of Dole Pineapple Company. I know, they got divorced. But yeah, so she was in Hawaii for quite some time, and with Dorothy Liebes doing a lot of commissions in Hawaii, she actually ended up doing all of the textiles in Helen Hughes Delaney's home in Honolulu as well. So the two of them, the correspondence, which I have to mention, and I should thank the Archives of American Art, all of Dorothy Liebes's papers are digitized, and you can go through all of them. And the scrapbooks are incredible. The correspondence between Helen Hughes Delaney and Dorothy Liebes is just inspiring, because not only is it a tale of design history, but also a female friendship and the power of them supporting each other. And I have to mention too, both of them were divorcees. So even just that sort of sisterhood that they were able to have during this time period is incredibly inspiring. So again, I had no idea who Helen Hughes Delaney was. So that began my journey in terms of finding out who she is and what she did. And one thing that I found out incredibly inspiring was she was actually one of the very first female industrial designers here in the United States. She is one of the reasons why stainless steel is popularized as a table setting. Now you don't think too much of using stainless steel utensils, a stainless steel platter, stainless steel coffee pot, but a huge part of that is because of Helen Hughes Delaney. She actually created this, and this is incredible. I wish this image was better quality, but these are actually stainless steel plates and stainless steel utensils that she did for aboard America's first diesel streamlined train, the Zephyr, which was a passenger train in Chicago. And so I had never heard of her, and here she is herself, which is, again, when you can find a photo of these actual people, it's so exciting. And there she is actually touching her wares and everything. So I first thought, okay, so she's working in steel. She's working in some sort of, she did a lot of work with steel at this time period. And so not only did she do this amazing table setting for the train, but then as I started digging a little deeper, I found that actually some of her work is in some of the top collections of the United States. So in the Brooklyn Museum on the right, this is actually a gorgeous like caviar server here. And so you can tell she's having a lot of fun with her shapes. And again, you have to think, I mean, this is done in the year 1930. You could tell me that this is from the Bauhaus and I would believe you, you know, because it's just so ahead of its time in terms of design, also in terms of materiality. And so we have this gorgeous caviar server, and then this entire coffee service here, which is just incredible when you think about the forms that she's using. Again, 1934. So it's just, she was so ahead of her time in terms of thinking about shape, thinking about form, fitting, function, also thinking about geometry in a really inspiring way. You can tell this is actually the creamer and the sugar bowl are both just little triangles itself. And these are all in, this is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the one on the right is actually in the Brooklyn Museum. And one thing that I love is the fact that she stamped it all, HHD Studio. And whenever I can find a little logo mark of the designer, that just makes me so happy, because it's another form of design for them to kind of have fun with. You know, they're not only doing their actual products, but then also doing the design of the logo, and how exciting that is. So I was able to come across the idea that she really popularized the idea of stainless steel, that she's collected, you know, in these top museums and has these gorgeous items here. Not only that, I was also able to find her in the pages of Vogue magazine. So thankfully, because I'm still with Parsons, I am able to go through Condé Nast archives for free, and I do it a lot. And I ended up finding even more pieces of Helen Hughes Delaney. So a very similar tale of Dorothy Liebes, where, you know, she was very well known during her time. She was being published everywhere. Yet now, you ask anybody on the street if they know Helen Hughes Delaney, and people are like, go away, right? So someone like Helen Hughes Delaney was in the pages of Vogue, and I have to point out just these other amazing pieces that she created. Trust me, we will get to more of the cups in a minute, but I couldn't help but share the gorgeous other objects that she was creating during this time period. So over here on the right, and again, this is all within the same spread. She was featured twice within this Vogue spread. The first one up on the top is actually a gorgeous little scarf pin in the shape of a nail, which, I mean, we all know the Cartier nail bracelet, which is just incredible to think about the fact that this woman during this time period is thinking of these very, utilitarian objects, but making them glamour and making them very highbrow in a sense. And then again, another gorgeous little serving dish here that she made again out of stainless steel. And then just wanted to mention one other issue of Vogue that she was in, where she made this gorgeous little cigarette holder. Am I okay? Am I little this way? Okay, all right, good. I always want to be like close to the objects. Objects. But anyways, so then there's this gorgeous cigarette holder as well. So just in terms of thinking of the way that Helen Hughes Delaney was operating at this time, it's not like she was just staying in her lane in terms of doing just jewelry, just homeware. She was doing it all, and she was having a lot of fun with it. And then this was kind of the icing on the cake. And I have to thank my colleague, Kim Randall at Cooper Hewitt, who was able to actually cement that those cups that were mentioned in that original newspaper article were in fact Helen Hughes Delaney, because one lovely day, Kim Randall found this issue of Vogue in which the exact cups are being featured, and they are labeled as Helen Hughes Delaney. You might be asking yourself, Charlotte, why didn't you find them first? Why, what was going on? You'll notice her name is actually spelt wrong in this issue of Vogue. And so that's something that I bring up even to my students, is when you are doing research, think of every iteration of the name that could happen, because oftentimes people are just jotting things down, and if the name Delaney, it might not necessarily be a name that you know exactly how to spell. So you can see here, it's actually spelled incorrectly, and that's why I wasn't able to find it at first, but I am so grateful that my coworker was able to. And so we see the exact cup there, and it's just stunning because it's really cool because you can tell that it's actually a singular piece. I wasn't even sure exactly what this cup looked like in real life. So being able to actually identify it, right? And that's a huge part within design history, is being able to cite your sources and have all of those resources outlined and labeled, and that this is the exact Helen Hughes Delaney. And what's incredible too, we're now getting a little hint of what its materiality is. So it's the gold and silver loop directly above is all designed by Helen Hughes Delaney, which is just incredible because, again, I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it was stainless steel, because so many of our other pieces were working with that sort of material. However, because we have the image of Dorothy Liebes and they appear gold, we can now actually identify, okay, so they were most likely gold. And so I have to kind of end my little talk with the gorgeous Suna Bonametti, who is with us today, and she's an incredible jewelry designer and close friend. And in honor of my investigation, my detective work of finding out about this, lovely story of female friendship and solving who had made those cups, because now every time you see that image of Dorothy Liebes, not only are you able to know who she is, but you're also able to know that Helen Hughes Delaney is the woman who made those cups, one of the first female industrial designers popularizing stainless steel. And so, in honor of that, Suna Bonametti so gratefully made me these gorgeous cups, and I have not taken them off, and I'm so bad at polishing them because I always want to wear them. And so I'm extremely grateful that in that same token of female friendship and of supporting designers, I'm able to wear something in homage not only to Dorothy, but also the amazing designer who made them. And I just have to end, because we can't not talk about it, without talking about Beyonce. And so, again, we're thinking this is the 1930s, the 1940s, where Helen Hughes Delaney is coming up with this gorgeous idea of these matching metallic cups. And there's something almost about armor about them, Every time I wear them, I'm like I just, and so I just feel powerful. I feel very inspired. And so I couldn't help but think of Helen Hughes Delaney must have been inspired by Wonder Woman, right? How could you not? When you think about the cups being your sword and your shield all in one. And then, of course, this is Beyonce in Amsterdam on the Renaissance World Tour. And she is wearing cups designed by Elsa Peretti, who is very well known for her work in silver and her bone cuff. And oftentimes, her cups are worn as a matching set. However, that was in the 1970s. So you can't only help but think that maybe Elsa Peretti knew who Helen Hughes Delaney was and was inspired by this idea of the matching metallic cups and kind of creating her own sort of powerful, sort of armor, which is just incredible. So just to call out the fact that the idea of the matching metal cups and how there's something powerful behind that, not only in its formality in terms of it as a design object, but also in the fact of what it stands for. And I think with Dorothy Liebes, it's a way to support her friend's work. And same with me. Every time I wear it, I'm like, Suna Bonametti. So it's just incredible when you think about, it's a design object, and what Karen had mentioned, its jewelry has all these stories behind it. And that's something that I think is truly wonderful when we think about what we pass down and how so many people pass down jewelry because it's of its longevity in terms of materiality, but then also the stories behind it and the wear and tear that has, and how it's almost a way to honor the person who wore it before you. And of course, I have to mention, if you are interested by anything I said today, please come up to the Upper East Side, Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, the National Design Museum. And right now, we actually occupy the entire second floor of the museum with all Dorothy Liebes all the time. It's actually just 10 to 6, but but please stop by and enjoy. I hope you all are inspired today, not only by the textiles of Dorothy Liebes, but then also thinking about what other sort of design history mysteries are out there, and all of these women whose work is out there and name hasn't really been attributed to their design. And I just want to, with that, leave you and thank you very much for joining me on this wild ride. And also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know.
Does anyone want to venture questions? That was terrific.
Oh, thank you. My first time presenting this research, so thank you.
And I just love that one designer led you to this extraordinary, discovery of another. Yes. Charlotte called me during when she discovered Helen Hughes Delaney, and I also went for I even had her in books. She was in a lot of books on silver and Art Deco design. So I think it's wonderful to kind of discover a designer that an important designer that we've never even heard of in jewelry. So, yes.
I have a very tiny question.
Yes.
In the Cooper Hewitt, where there was the tapestry hanging with the little lights.
Yes.
Are those lights?
Oh, it kills me. They're not there, and it's so sad because actually, there's a whole story. So the Persian room, they actually redid those drapes. If you go to Cooper Hewitt right now, unfortunately the panel. Did you see it at Cooper Hewitt?
No.
You're gonna go.
Not yet.
You're gonna go. Okay, good. Okay, let me know when you go. I'll be there. So if you go to Cooper Hewitt right now, unfortunately the panel does not have the original lights that were woven in. And that's because Dorothy oftentimes made sample panels that she would keep for herself. She was very good at posterity, and so she had that panel that she kept for herself. All of the original panels that were in the Persian room, we had no idea where they are. And it's just another mystery, right? So yes, unfortunately they're not woven into that panel. Who knows, maybe they're out there somewhere though. Yes, see.
Hi, Chip. This is amazing.
Thank you.
When you were doing your research and you were looking back at Dorothy Liebes and Delaney, were you thinking about any contemporary jewelry makers or artists that may be influenced or remind you of the tip?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Elsa Peretti immediately came to mind, which is why I pulled up the Beyonce photo, because I kept thinking about how everyone kind of knows about Elsa Peretti and her work in silver and these, matching cups and everything. And I just thought, you know, that was in the 1970s. These girls, they were doing the cuffs in the 1930s, you know? So yeah, immediately I thought of Elsa Peretti. But then I also couldn't help but think about just, I mean, I don't know if you saw in terms of the way that the cuffs were described, they were described almost as like African looking. And so I think there's also something to the idea of what people were wearing all over the world and how all of it is kind of inspiring the sort of design that you see now. Thank you. Yes.
When was that photo taken?
This photo here, we actually don't have an exact date for it, unfortunately. It's by, do you know George Platt Lyons' work? He's a homoerotic photographer, so that's another presentation. But no, this is a very G-rated photo of his. Like all of the other ones, it's very interesting but Dorothy was like in the know. She had a lot of gay friends, and so she had George Platt Lyons take this photo. And we don't have an exact date for it, but I want to say it's most likely sometime in the 1940s.
Well, thank you.
Oh,
we got another question.
Any hints about where her jewelry might
Oh,
be? Or anything like that?
good question. Yes. So Dorothy Liebes, unfortunately, did not have any children. And it's like making me debate my whole life. And because the children are the ones who hold on to all of their mom's stuff, you know? And so, unfortunately, she didn't have any children. However, she did have nephews. And her nephews, if you go to the exhibition, one of Dorothy Liebes' original Bonnie Cashin coats is in the exhibition. And it's because one of her nephews had held onto it. And, you know, it was right before the exhibition, while we were in the midst of planning, this nephew had said, "Oh, I have a box of Dorothy's clothes and there's this poncho in it." And thankfully we were able to get it to the museum in time, and it's on display now at Cooper Hewitt. But I am hoping and praying that nephew has a jewelry box and that these cuffs are in there plus more. But yeah, that's our current hypothesis, at least, is that it has to be with her nephews, and I have to find out where they live. So any other questions or comments?
Well, you mentioned Margaret DePata.
Oh, yes. Oh, and I know, I was going to text Karen and be like, I cut the DePata and the Mathilde Poulat just because I was already, you know me. But anyways, and I know, I didn't want to keep you all here too long. But basically, so Dorothy Liebes had this amazing network of artists. Like I mentioned, she was very close with Isamu Noguchi. She called Alexander Calder Sandy, which is funny because I had no idea he went by Sandy. And so I was doing all of this research, and then all of a sudden I was like, Sandy? Who? Like, and then my boss was like, it's Alexander Calder. And I was like, oh, okay. And so she was friends with everybody, and including a lot of other artists and designers and jewelry designers, such as Margaret DePata, which, if you're not familiar with her, she's another amazing California-based, right? Yeah, California-based designer who, again, was also working with incredibly modern formats, materials, and everything. So I actually went through Margaret DePata's archives earlier this year to see if I could find any receipts, like literal receipts that say, like, this commission was for Dorothy Liebes, or trying to put the two of them together. And unfortunately, I haven't found any jewelry that connects them yet, but they were very close friends and, you know, ran in the same circles. So Dorothy Liebes not only supported someone like Helen Hughes Delaney, but then also Margaret DePata, and then of course Mathilde Poulat, which if you go to basically any design museum in Mexico City, they will have Mathilde Poulat on display. Her work is incredible. And that's kind of what I hope this talk and my research in general inspires, is the idea of all of these other names are still out there and there's so much more research to be done. So all you have to do is just look at something and then, you know, tell the story behind it. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.